This is the bizarro world of Canadian investment advice. If you go to seek advice, they will tell you to buy this ridiculously expensive mutual fund, which looks identical to this fund from the same bank that charges 1/20th of the cost. It's madness. And the problem is, in Canada, as in other places in the world, the industry never presents a bill. They never say, here, Bo, here's exactly what you're paying, and here's the impact of those costs over time. Do you understand that? Perhaps you'd like to look at some lower cost products we have on the shelf over here. They never say that.
This is the Personal Finance Show.
Hi, I'm Bo Humphreys, and this is the Personal Finance Show. Larry Bates wants you to beat the bank. That's the title of his new book, and it's all about challenging the status quo of Canadians paying the highest investment fees in the world and believing that the financial industry has their best interests at heart. You see, Larry spent his whole career on the business side of the banking and investment worlds. One day he was sitting up in his ivory tower and a phone call from his sister changed everything. That's when he decided to use his knowledge about the financial industry to become an advocate for Canadian investors. Larry's all about transparency and making sure you don't pay high investment fees. And in his book, he proves that you don't need to be an expert to be an investor. You just need to know the basics. Larry joined me in the studio in Hamilton to share his personal finance story.
I can remember my parents announcing every a year or so when I was a little kid, okay, we're going to go on an economy drive.
An economy drive. Okay. I'll let you explain what that is.
Basically, tightening down the everything and limiting spending.
Okay, like in the household.
Yeah, in the household. Okay.
So this is an event.
Yeah, we're not going to buy fresh milk anymore. We're going to buy powdered milk. Or,
okay.
One less pork chop in the package or something
Interesting.
like that. So I remember that. That's probably the next memory about money I remember was became a newspaper boy.
So you started making money of your own. So you learn about this. I'll just go back to the economy drive for a sec. You learned, and this taught you to audit your spending every so often, or
it wasn't
did it teach
really
you anything?
It was just the awareness that this is important. Okay, there's some money coming in and there's a bunch of money going out.
Yeah.
You've got to manage this, and it's important for the as a family thing, as a household.
So you knew that early.
Yeah.
Like really early?
Yeah, I don't know, it was 6, 7, 8 years old. I remember hearing about the economy drives.
Yeah, okay. Okay, so
it made sense.
I'm sure we'll come back to that at some point. So now you're making real money, little money, newspaper. You don't make tons of money doing that, though.
I think, this is, in the 60s, right? So I think I was making $5 a week or something.
Sure. Well, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was great.
Okay.
Fantastic.
Do you remember what you would spend this kind of thing on?
The first thing I bought was a camera. It cost $10.
Really? But a film camera?
Yeah, like
a regular point and shoot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So
were you into photography?
I mean, I don't know. It was more like a toy. I got bored with it fast, actually.
Okay. the time it takes to develop the film.
Yeah. It was, and it cost a lot of money. It costs as much to develop a film as the camera costs.
People might not know what film is, even if they're listening. Why would I develop film when I can just load them onto my computer?
So
right?
20th century, I know.
Yeah. So, okay, you're making money as this here where you buy your camera. Maybe you're buying other little things, but no big deal.
I bought Canada savings bonds, I think.
Wait, not then.
Yeah,
Really?
I think I bought
that early.
Saved up $100 and bought a Canada savings bond.
Wow,
and it was like 8% interest or something.
Sure, yeah, something fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you remember what might have happened to that savings bond?
I think I actually ended up saving, and by the time I went to
for university,
I probably ended up with $300 or $400 saved
Yeah.
up from my paper route.
That's
right?
amazing.
Yeah.
That's such early early saving. You don't even think I'm just going to buy a bond with this, and everyone else is buying whatever toys or you bought your camera.
Yeah, no, I didn't save it all by any
No,
means.
so you had this balance early on. You just kept doing that and saving it?
No, I mean, I wasn't a paper boy forever. I was
No,
for
yeah.
3 or 4 years, and then I became a teenager, and the hell with that, right?
Yeah,
Just
hell
moved
yeah.
on.
Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
I want to have fun,
Yeah.
but
So,
also make some money.
my first summer job was I was 17, and then I kept doing summer jobs through
Yeah.
until ended university.
What kind of job do you remember?
Yeah. Well, it was I worked on the ships that ferry passengers between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland.
Okay, so this is a good time to mention you're from the East Coast.
Yeah. I grew up. I was born in Nova Scotia and grew up mostly in Moncton, New Brunswick.
Okay, nice. So you're working on the water or on
the ships? Yeah.
Yeah.
The ships was a 6-hour trip from Cape Breton to Newfoundland. And
Okay.
back and forth. two
Yeah,
or three times.
I
a
might
day,
be
and
making
was
that
fun.
trip in the summer. That'll be nice.
Oh, you'll love it.
My wife's family is from Cape Breton, so
And
I
that's-
got to see Newfoundland.
Cape Breton and Newfoundland are the two most unique parts of English speaking Canada.
Yeah.
Anyway, and you'll love it. My parents are from Cape Breton also.
Oh, amazing. Wait, so is Bates the last name?
Yeah, and there's a little hamlet in Cape Breton called Bateston.
Bateston. Okay, well, we'll have to look for that.
There's a stop sign there, so don't blink. That's it. That's all that's there.
Okay, so you have different opportunities than someone working, say, in the prairies or in Ontario even, and being able to do that. And were you saving? Do you already have this ability to?
Yeah, I was
to
definitely saving at that point.
all of that
saving for
stuff.
university at that point, and
Yeah.
it was a great summer job because it was a union job.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
I was making more than most of my friends in my summer job, so that was great.
And did you have any help to pay for university? Like, what were your
Yeah,
were your
my parents pitched in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but this money would it be your spending money or like just kind of to help cover tuition?
I probably paid my tuition and paid part of my housing, and probably paid for half of it overall, maybe 60%. And my parents pitched in the rest.
Did you have like a formal deal with them, or were they always going to pay for some of it?
They were generous, and I was contributed, so it was worked well.
What kind of work did they do, if you don't mind?
My
talking
father
about
was a civil engineer, and he worked for Canadian National Railways his whole career.
Oh, really? Wow! Like an actual, rail engineer, like the ones that
not the guy
not
at the
driving,
front, the toot, but
in that industry, really
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and he loved it.
Yeah, awesome. Then where'd you go to university?
I went to Dalhousie University in Halifax. I started in the siguance program.
Okay.
All I knew was I didn't want to do arts.
Sure, and those
I
were the
didn't know
two
much
options.
else. But then I figured out there was this business program, commerce degree, and I thought, wow, sounds pretty cool. So I switched.
And did you have an interest? Like, were you able to take any courses in high school in like finance or commerce or
economics?
accounting?
Economics was
economics.
it. Yeah, and I really enjoyed that.
Okay.
Although it was. But I like the more realistic business stuff better because economists focus on the future, and some of it's
That's right.
It's
like it's all guessing games.
A lot of theory,
and
it doesn't hold so well in practice.
Was it the investing part of it, or like did you want to be an entrepreneur? What was it that like I want to run a business?
I just was interested in the business side of it. That's what intrigued me, and in terms of my the courses I liked the whole program except for accounting. I hated that. But,
everybody hates accounting. I'm like the only one that actually enjoyed the basic. Like grade 11 accounting was my favorite course.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain. I like math, so there is a certain beauty in the organizing, the logic, and everything. But I liked finance and investing. That's what I liked. And when I did my degree at Dal.
So it was a commerce, Bachelor of Commerce.
Yes.
And do you get to specialize in financial products like You're talking about derivatives or things like that, or?
Well, I wasn't much happening in the late 70s when I was.
Oh,
going to
gotcha.
school.
Okay, so this is these relatively new concepts then.
Well, I was I got involved in derivatives in my career in sort of the early formative days of a lot of that stuff, which was fantastic.
Interesting.
But
so
was,
stock options and what would you classify as a derivative? Options, futures, swaps. Yeah. So all these things,
forwards.
Probably anybody who's listening is like, I don't want to know about any of this stuff. But but these are tools that could probably that probably helped you make a little more money in your career as well.
Well, I
right?
mean, I don't think these are not instruments for. They're not particularly useful for average investors.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay?
Yeah.
But they are. They're actively used by professionals and by large institutional investors and large corporations and governments to manage risk and to make investments
for hedging, right?
Yeah.
Like, would you say, like, if some, I mean, in businesses I've been in, we've dealt in two currencies, say, right?
Yeah.
Canadian and U.S. currency.
Right.
And so if we're, dealing a lot in a U.S. currency, which we don't control, it's good to use, a currency future to hedge the risk. You're basically eliminating risk, right?
Yes, and that's how most companies use derivatives,
Yes.
to eliminate risk. And people think derivatives are this sort of nasty nuclear bomb or this
Sure, yeah.
it's radioactive, dangerous stuff, and it can be.
Yeah.
But but most of it is most of derivatives are used for hedging.
Well, the reason I bring it up is because there's a lot of there's a lot of different strategies for individuals being put out there, right? In terms of do this, do that, and you can cover all of your all of your risk. Encouraging someone to buy a bunch of options and maybe putting some sort of cap on them so that you have no loss. Like, what do you think of these sort of personal investing strategies that are out there?
Well, I don't subscribe to that kind of stuff. I did a little bit of it when I was younger.
Sure.
But it was really just
trying it out.
Yeah, trying it out. But to me, that's not really investing.
Sure. Okay.
That's kind of like
it's gambling.
Gambling.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like betting on the market.
It really
market's
is.
Market's going to go up. Market's going to go down. What's hot? What's cryptocurrency or cannabis stocks? Or I think Apple's going to go crazy in the next 6 months.
All
they sell more iPhones.
Speculation.
That's to me, that's not really investing.
Yeah. Well, then what is your definition of investing? Say.
Yeah, my definition of investing, in terms of the stock market, is
sure. long-term
business ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? That's the biggest wealth creator in the world.
Yeah.
And I love the stock market because it basically democratizes capitalism.
Right. You can own little bits of this and that.
Whatever, decades or centuries ago.
Yeah.
Only the very wealthy had access to long-term, owning businesses over the long term.
People would go to someone with a lot of money and say, will you invest in my business?
Yeah. Average people didn't have access to the benefits of business ownership.
That's right.
The stock market gives people that. Anybody with a couple $1,000s or more can be a business owner by owning stocks. I mean, if I own 100 shares of Royal Bank or even one share of Royal Bank,
you get a vote.
I'm a business owner. I've got thousands of people going to work for me every day whose number one aim is to make money for me, the shareholder. And so, that's a fantastic thing.
I like that.
Yeah. The way I look at it is, don't bet on the market. Use the market to bet on long-term business ownership. That's how wealth is created. That
makes a lot of sense because the alternative, which we were mentioning about, trying to time things and buying options and forwards and predicting where things are going to go, that's just like looking at graphs and stuff and looking at numbers and saying, I think this is going to go up. You're not really paying attention to the business most of the time, are you?
Well, all that's short-term trading.
It's short-term.
That's not about wealth creation. That's actually about exchanging wealth, trading wealth back and forth. And most average investors, when they're doing that, lose.
There's no growth there. You're right. It's just balancing out. One goes up, one goes down, and you're just...
It's a zero-sum
Somebody
game.
Loses,
Yeah, and it's usually you.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
The professional is the one who usually wins.
That's right.
They're probably playing smarter, but even they lose all the time.
They do.
Professionals can't predict.
They just don't talk about those, do they? And they try to make it up the next day. Day trading. Like I just, whenever I hear... I actually don't know if I've ever heard of anyone being successful in day trading.
People talk about their success but don't mention their failures. But I prefer decade trading.
Yes, exactly. You want to have a decade at least on the horizon when you buy something. You're not going to do anything with it for at least a decade, right?
I'll give you kind of my favorite chart in the book is a series of statistics, 90 years of statistics, daily statistics from the S&P 500, which is the largest U.S. stock index. It looked at every single day as to whether the market was up or down. So on any given day over 90 years, what do you think the probability is of the market being up?
I don't know, 50%?
54% on any given day.
Yeah.
Which means that there's a 46% chance of you losing money.
Yeah.
Now, if you're risk averse, that doesn't sound very risk averse, does it?
No.
Okay. Now,
on
if
a
we
day.
Look, right, on a day. So if we go to a 5-year time frame, If you look at 5-year chunks of time, the probability of making money goes to 75%.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
If you look at 10 years, it goes to 95%.
Yeah.
If you look at 20 years, it's 100%. So there has never been a 20-year period over the last century, effectively, on the S&P 500 where a person could possibly have lost money.
No losing money. You might not, if you have any expectations, you might not get the return that you thought you might get, but that's another story completely.
I mean, you can pull the numbers any given way, but what I'm saying essentially is if you have a diversified group of good stocks, time converts a short-term gamble to a pretty
It's not a
darn
gamble
good bet.
anymore. You're going to make money.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how much. And if, you shouldn't expect it to make, tons of money. Like, I think people have these crazy high expectations, though, don't they? Like a 20% return over time, which is not realistic, is it?
No, but the incredible thing is you can earn a reasonable, what looks like a reasonable return or a modest return even over a year. Let's say 5 or 6 or 7%, but you do that over 20 years, and compounding powers that return into astonishing results.
Yeah, compounding helps, and then it might average like 5 or 6 or 7% every year, but the fact that maybe 1 year it went up, 1 year it went down, but the compounding really does make the huge difference, right?
You'll triple or quadruple your money over 20 years with a 7% annual return.
Yeah, okay, and we'll get back to that, and we'll get back to the book. But I want to continue with your story. So
sure.
You get this degree in commerce. At this time, if I remember from other guests, people come to your school and offer you jobs? Did they do that to you?
Not quite.
Okay.
I graduated from Dalhousie in 1978. And at that time, for commerce graduates, there were 3 main types of employers.
Okay.
One was the federal government. And I didn't get past the second round there.
Really?
And I thought that would be a great. I was all keen.
Yeah, you wanted to do government.
Well, because in the Maritimes, if you get a government job, that's a government pension,
You're
index,
set.
and all that stuff. Man, that's that's hard to beat. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so I failed there. I didn't get anywhere there. The other 2 main employers were accounting firms.
Which
Scratch
not,
that
not
one.
your
No interest.
cup of tea.
And then bank branch trainee.
Okay.
Go work in a branch in a little town somewhere and be the assistant branch manager.
What about private companies and stuff? No?
There wasn't much.
Not
But
much, eh?
But I
Okay.
did. I was able to get a job at Sun Life Assurance Company.
Okay.
In their investment division
Interesting.
in Halifax. So mortgages and real estate investment.
Yeah, like investing the money that the company had?
Yeah, and investing their institutional money
Yeah.
in residential mortgages as well as commercial mortgages.
Okay.
And so I learned a bit about the investment business there. I did that for a year, but then I landed a job just by applying through a newspaper ad. I landed a job at Scotiabank in Toronto.
Okay. And
And
so
so
you
that's-
moved.
yeah.
Is that when you moved from the East Coast?
Yes. So
Okay.
I've been here for almost 40 years.
Oh, wow. And so what did you start doing at Scotiabank?
I was a banker. I was a credit analyst, analyzing credit risk on corporate loan applications.
So big loans?
Big company, big U.S. corporate loans. Yeah.
Interesting. And because Scotiabank was always outside of Canada, or were they just starting at this time, or how long are they?
They've been doing that kind of business for
Early days?
For a long, long time.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe Scotiabank had an international branch before they had a Toronto branch.
Did they really?
They had a branch in Jamaica before they had a branch in Toronto.
And a lot of other places in the world as well, right?
Yep.
But, we think of them as a Canadian bank or an East Coast bank even.
Yeah, and that's where they started in Halifax in, 1810
Yeah,
or whatever
early,
it was.
really early days. That's
Yeah.
well, probably, when the bank started in Canada.
Yeah.
So you're looking at companies, they need money for something, and they're coming to Scotiabank, and they're like, I need this money. I want to build another warehouse, or I want to do this or that, or maybe even bigger stuff than that. And you're assessing them to see if they are a good risk.
Yeah, see if they're going to pay back their money.
Yeah, how do you know? How do you know?
Well, just looking at their financial condition, looking at their sales, looking at their trends, et cetera, et cetera. And these are all big companies.
Sure.
And, but some big companies go bankrupt sometimes.
That's right.
So, banks are careful who they lend money to, and
Sure.
They're usually right, but on the other hand, banks do screw up every few years very royally.
Do you remember saying no or like recommending a no to certain ones? I know this is early days.
Yeah, I mean, Yeah, I can remember, red flag.
Red flag.
But I was, I didn't know much. I was a very junior guy at that point.
You knew enough
I
to
was training.
look at a balance sheet or an income statement and see that maybe something didn't sit right, or just look at data over years.
Yeah.
You're
that's
good
what I was,
at
and
analysis.
I was learning. I mean, I was being trained to do that. So,
yeah. So are you doing that for a little bit then, or?
I did that for a year or so, and then they wanted me to move to New York or Atlanta because I was working in the U.S. division essentially, and I just started enjoying life in Toronto, so I wanted to stay. So I swithed over to Canada Trust, which was starting a corporate lending business. So I did that. So when I was sort of 24, 25, I was going out and talking to big companies and arranging large loans for them. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I learned a lot there. It's great.
This is so much fun because before you were just sort of at a desk.
I was at a desk, internal,
looking at documents.
Yeah.
And now you're going out to talk to people.
Now I'm going out talking to treasurers and VPs of finance, and I'm only 24, 25. It was crazy. You couldn't get to do that.
But you have all the power here. You got the money.
Yeah.
You're the bank.
Yeah.
And you're trying to help them but you're also trying to get them as clients.
Yeah, and competing against other financial institutions who are trying to earn their business.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was great experience.
Sometimes I'll just, if somebody has a finance background, I'll focus on like what they did, but I also want to talk about what you were doing with your money at this time. So you paid for school. Did you have any loans when you were done?
I did have small student loans. Yeah.
So you're just paying those back, like nothing nothing breaking.
Yeah. Again, I was lucky. I had a good summer job. And
and then help from parents. That's
Yeah.
good. So you get to Toronto, and is this big bucks for you, or is it still like entry level money at the time?
Moving from Halifax, I think I was making, $11,000 a year there or something like that. My first job, and the Scotiabank job was 18.
Okay,
so that was a pretty good move.
That's a pretty good move, yeah. 1 year,
and then so I was doing well, living in an apartment in Midtown Toronto, and life was good. I was having lots of fun.
So you're having fun. You start buying any investments, any assets at this time, or when would your first sort of investment or property? Did you buy property
at that point? What the savings was?
You're just building up savings
in order to eventually build a house, buy a house, which we did.
Was that always the goal? Did you have that goal in mind? Like, this is for a down payment for a house. Yeah.
Of course, you can't predict the future, but that was in the back of my mind.
Yeah, because I guess today not everybody has that goal for their savings, but was that more like, was that just something you were definitely going to do?
Well, that's what was in my mind at the time, yeah.
And then, about all these financial products, but you're not touching those yourself yet? I was in the banking world, so I wasn't really in the investment industry yet. Not yet, okay.
So,
okay.
I probably didn't even have stocks at that time. I just, GICs and, earning interest. And at the time, you could earn 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% interest on on your savings bonds or GICs or whatever. So it was pretty good.
Well, somebody told me that mutual funds kind of came to be because you couldn't make money on GICs and bonds much anymore, and they were looking for something that was worth people's while.
Yeah.
Like, it was actually a positive thing to have a mutual fund that charged 2.5% at one point, right? Because it was way better than the alternatives.
Yeah, I think mutual funds really started to grow in volume in Canada when interest rates started to drop lower, as you said, and also as companies stopped providing guaranteed pensions.
Okay, yes.
So that people coincided. Had to sort of invest through their own RSPs and so forth. And so that was really the rise of mutual funds. And I don't think it was ever good to have to pay those terrible fees.
So never good.
Which do so much damage. But
absolutely.
But yeah, they were better than some alternatives at the time. Of course, now there's lots of lower cost alternatives that are much better than mutual funds.
Eventually, you're getting into working in investing.
Yes.
And so how long until that?
I left Canada Trust after 3 or 4 years and went to Merrill Lynch. I was at Merrill Lynch for a couple of years and then RBC Capital Markets for 23 years or something.
And this is business.
This was dealing with large institutions, dealing with big companies, never dealing with individual investors.
Not at the time.
And I dealt mostly in bonds and related derivatives, so not stocks. But I was in the investment world for 30 years or whatever. And,
Mhm.
So I learned a lot. I worked with large institutional investors in Canada and around the world
Mhm.
and advised them, worked with them. So I learned a lot.
Yeah, and so did you then apply this knowledge at the time to your personal investments? Were you learning enough like to realize like what was good and what was bad for you?
I wish
at the time.
I knew, I had a better philosophy. I never really thought about the long term.
Interesting. Yeah. Then
at that time.
Yeah.
So, I bought a few stocks. I did play around with options a little bit, but I kind of figured out, look, you want to be a long-term business owner.
Mhm.
But yeah, I did listen to my brokers at the time and they were saying, oh, you should buy this fund, this Thai fund, or this, this or whatever. So I did buy some crappy stuff along the way.
Yeah. So at the time, you got some savings. You have your house, which you're paying down, so you're building equity there. You got your savings, and then everybody's saying, well, you should buy some of this or that, and because that was the way to go. No mutual funds yet at this point.
I did have some of that kind of stuff, but then I kind of figured it out, and then I started buying and holding kind of forever.
Yeah.
Blue chip stocks like bank stocks,
yes,
or like Bell Canada or like CNR or stocks like that, which I've some of which I've owned for for decades.
Yeah, you still have many of them,
and
right?
that's been by far the best.
And that was the safe way to go at the time. Safe, but like, and we look, hindsight is 20/20, right? We look back and, if somebody asks now, what should I have done, 30 years ago? Buy bank stocks, right? Is the is the answer.
Sure.
But would we say put everything in bank stocks now? Well, no, because
we don't know
we don't know where it's going. Also, it doesn't really meet the diversification aspect of what most of us recommend, right, to be safe and balanced in long-term growth, right? For risk management. But if you look back and if you bought banks and you had $50,000 in banks a while back, you're doing pretty okay right now. Like, what is it, 25% or something returns? I don't even know.
Yeah,
it's high.
The banks have been great,
right?
And again, the compounding effect over time.
Exactly,
is
that
very
over time.
Powerful.
Because
especially if you reinvest the dividends that they pay.
That's it. And so, yeah, that's another interesting thing to mention. I do own a couple of bank stocks. And, yeah, they have automatic dividend reinvestment programs, and they're free. And I've written a couple of posts on that. You don't have to go through a broker even. You can buy them directly from the company.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Free trades.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's if somebody wants to get started. But now everything's so much, I guess, simpler in a way. Like, I feel like there were so many barriers even 5 years ago, like before Wealthsimple and the other robos started in Canada.
Yes.
And I was just like anti-broker. And so when Wealthsimple came up, I was like, well, this is great. Like, you're actually going to just take my money and charge like a little teeny tiny 0.5%. I'm okay with that because people don't invest because it's so complicated, right?
Absolutely, and investing is portrayed as so confusing and complicated and dangerous. Don't even bother trying, So yeah, I think the robo advisors like Wealthsimple or Nest Wealth, et cetera, they're great for sort of a no-brainer,
the beginner,
super low maintenance.
Right?
Yeah, answer a few questions in an online survey, and they'll recommend a portfolio, and sign up, and it's just leave it. Now they do charge.
They do charge
for that, and but way less than mutual funds.
Yeah, that's right.
A fraction of what mutual funds. So you'll build a bigger nest egg using a robo advisor.
Yeah,
you can you could just buy 3 or 4 simple index ETFs.
Do it yourself.
Canadian stock ETF, a U.S. stock ETF, perhaps a bond ETF. That'll cost you maybe 0.25% a year in costs.
And just some time, like a little bit of your time.
A bit of time. But you can spend 2 or 3 hours a year literally doing that.
Yeah, it's really just sort of rebalancing.
If you know what to do.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you could buy stocks yourself. I think that's probably right for only about 5 or 10% of people.
Yeah.
So you really have to have some experience and comfort.
You have to have an interest in it, right? That's what I always say.
And a little bit of an interest. Although you could buy, let's say, I don't know, pick a stock, RBC, Bell,
sure.
Apple, Google, I don't know, Johnson & Johnson. You could buy a stock.
Yeah.
And tuck it away and not look at it for 20 years. You don't have to do anything.
Yeah,
If
it's
you're
true. It's
long-term.
it's
pretty easy.
Just don't put all your money in the one stock.
Of course you have to. That's one of the challenges of doing it yourself.
Yes.
You have to build some diversification because we don't know which stocks are going to do well in the future. And you're probably going to have some that don't do so well, and hopefully that'll be offset by some that do. So really doing it yourself is an option for some investors. The couch potatoes, sort of buy 2 or 3 low-cost index ETFs. That's a fantastic route for many. And then robo-advisor if you want a super low maintenance, low touch. The key, in my view, Bo, for investors out there is take a little bit of time to learn the basics. And if you do, investing can be very simple. In fact, the simpler, the better. If you do that, you build a little bit of knowledge and be able to take advantage of these low-cost, fantastic low-cost alternatives, robo or couch potato approach or whatever, and avoid the high-cost mutual funds, which most advisors, that's all they sell is this high-cost stuff.
Because that's their job.
That's their job.
To sell these.
That's their job. Like a good example is just to pick a bank, TD Bank.
Yeah.
They've got, a super low-cost index fund.
Sure.
They charge less than 0.1% a year.
Okay.
And what stocks do they own? The big 5 banks, CNR, Enbridge, Suncor, and TransCanada Pipeline. So those are 9 of the top 10 stocks.
Saves you from buying them all yourself. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So they only charge less than 0.1% a year. Pretty good, right?
Yeah.
But if you go to a TD Bank branch, they'll tell you to buy the TD Canadian Dividend Fund.
Of course.
Which what are their 9 of their top 10 stocks? The same.
Same thing.
Top 5 banks: Suncor, TransCanada Pipeline, CN, and
Okay.
Enbridge. Okay. Same stocks, but what do they charge? They charge 2% a year.
Really? Versus the 0.1.
So that's the bizarre thing.
Yeah.
This is the bizarro world of Canadian investment advice.
What do they have logic for this?
The logic is they get paid a pile of money to do it. But it's just bizarre. If you go to seek advice, they will tell you to buy this ridiculously expensive mutual fund, which looks identical to this fund from the same bank that charges 1/20th of the cost. It's madness.
You're working in banks. Yeah, I know you're not working directly with individuals when you were, but are you seeing this while you're there? Are you what inspired the book? Like, what were there events that happened, or just your slow realization?
Yeah, I didn't pay a lot of attention to how the average investor was treated. I figured out pretty quickly, these mutual funds and the stuff brokers sell are usually crap. Yeah. And I started
for yourself
buying long-term individual stocks. But I was aware of what was going on with retail investors and just sort of, thought, wow, this is kind of crappy. But I wasn't involved in that business.
Yeah.
But then about 5 years ago, I was sitting on the trading floor on the 68th floor of one of the bank towers in downtown Toronto, and I got a call from my sister Mary.
Okay.
In New Brunswick. And she said, Larry, hey, all we hear about is how well the stock market's doing, but this bank mutual fund that we've held for 15 years really hasn't done very much.
Yeah.
We don't understand why. Can you have a look?
Sure.
So I had a quick peek, and I said, well, do you realize you're paying 2.3% in fees? And she said, what, you were paying fees? I said, yeah. She said, you mean 2.3% of our gains every year? I said, no, 2.3% of your total amount invested, which means if you've owned it for the past 15 years, 30 or 40% of your money is gone in fees.
Yeah.
And she was shocked, upset. Like, she and her husband, they're average Canadians. Every penny of her savings is precious to her. She felt like, wow, she felt betrayed. Now, I'm not saying the bank lied to her, but they certainly didn't explain the fees very well, or they certainly didn't explain the impact of those fees.
Yeah, they made it seem like they should be trusted, like they were looking out for her.
Yeah, and that's, Canadians are just too trusting of their banks. I had a guy
Definitely.
Twitter last week. He said to me, Canadians treat banks like their local priest or minister,
or Tim Hortons.
Or Tim Hortons is like, everybody trusts them, and that's blind trust is not healthy in any commercial relationship.
Yeah,
okay?
like you're buying and selling products.
You got to have a little buyer beware. You have to have a little bit of knowledge. So my sister Mary, I think, here I am on, doing well on Bay Street, driving a BMW, everything's good, and my sister down in New Brunswick is getting shafted, just trying to do her best, and that really that bugged me, and I felt I wasn't feeling too good about my the industry I was working in. So I thought, I'm going to do something about this.
Okay.
ended up writing this book and becoming an advocate for individual investors.
That's great. And I noticed that you're part of a transparency group. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm involved with a couple
about?
of groups. One is the Investor Advisory Panel for the Ontario Securities Commission.
Okay.
So it's a group of people who advise the regulators on investment rules and regulations from an investor point of view.
Yeah.
Trying to represent the
what
average investor.
What the people actually think.
And then there's this group called Transparency Task Force out of the UK.
I like that.
And their message is they're advocating for financial institutions to be straight up, to be honest about what they're charging.
Yes.
And also what they're doing generally, the products
Imagine
they're selling.
that.
Imagine that. And the problem is, in Canada, as in other places in the world, the industry never presents a bill. They never say, here, Bo, here's exactly what you're paying. And here's the impact of those costs over time. Do you understand that? Perhaps you'd like to look at some lower cost products we have on the shelf over here. They never say that.
That's crazy. And it's just like any other, well, I like to think it's like any other business, like if you're going to buy a car. But I guess the truth is it is a very unique thing, right? You're buying an investment. You're buying a piece of something that's supposed to grow over time. Yeah. And then the compensation is so weirdly structured.
Well, they
that
never
kind of thing.
They don't present a bill, and they never see the money leaving because they just silently deduct it from your account every week or month or quarter or whatever it is. So people like my sister Mary, she didn't understand this, and she's no dummy, right?
Yeah,
she's a smart woman. 5 million Canadians out there own these expensive mutual funds, and 99% of them have no sense of the damage that these high fees what they cause. So most Canadian investors take 100% of the market risk, but they're only earning about 50% of the return. That's the math.
Really, eh?
A 2% fee consumes 50% of your returns over time.
Wow.
So it is it's shocking.
It's 2% taken off of whatever balance it is at the time. Is it monthly? Is it annually?
Well, depending. Sometimes it's daily.
Sometimes it's daily.
Yeah.
So 2%, and then so there's less of it to grow. Is that the concept?
Well, you lose the 2%.
Yeah.
So let's just use an example. Let's say the investments in your mutual fund on average grow at a rate of 6% a year.
Yeah.
Okay. But fees of 2% are deducted, so
That's
you
right.
only get 4% a year. But not only are you losing the
2% that year,
your fund is compounding now at 4 instead of 6.
And so it's like,
and that's an enormous difference over time. That could double.
So the next year you would get, like, say if it was 6%. Let's say you lost that 2% in fees. That would have normally been then compounded another 6% the next year, and the next year, and the next year, and the next year. But it's gone, and every year it's gone.
Yes,
and that just seems, like you said, it works out to about 50% loss.
Yeah. So a couple quotes I love.
Sure.
One is from Einstein.
Yep.
He said that compounding is the most powerful force in the universe.
Yeah.
And it is astonishing what compounding can do over time. The other quote that I think is worth keeping in mind comes from Jack Bogle, who was the founder of Vanguard Funds, which is the largest low-cost index fund
Bogleheads, I think, are the people who follow him.
He's revered by so many people because he
Vanguard,
kind of invented these low-cost funds.
Absolutely.
And he said that the miracle of compounding returns can be destroyed by the tyranny of compounding costs.
Okay.
So compounding is fantastic when you're earning it.
Yes.
But it can be devastated when you're paying it. And effectively, these mutual funds, when you're paying 2% fees or whatever, it really damages this compounding effect, which is a huge driver of investment returns.
And so you wrote this book to try to make sure that people at least find something that's do you find, like, if they feel like they're getting 2% of value from their fees, would you accept that? Like, if people, I feel like I'm getting the value, is that happen? Is that real? Like, what kind of value am I getting from a 2% fee?
Well, I think 2%, given that turns out to be, it tears out
really
half of your returns.
Yeah.
It'd be pretty tough to conclude that you're getting value.
Like, you like your advisor, you have a friend.
Now, if you're paying, if your total fees, including the product fees, and again, most people don't see these because the industry never talks about it. But let's say you're paying a total of 1% fees.
Sure.
Well, if you really feel like you're getting good advice that goes along with that, like coming up with a savings plan, or
Yeah.
looking at your retirement,
Estate
how much cash
planning,
will I
maybe
need?
additional advice. Yeah.
Real valuable advice. And you say, okay, well, I'm losing a good chunk of my return, but I'm getting advice I couldn't get elsewhere, and it's really important to me.
Yeah.
Hey, that's great. If you understand what the impact of the costs are, and with that understanding, you feel you're getting good value from the advice you're receiving, fantastic.
Yeah, but the 2% just seems like it's too much. It takes away too much for it to be really worth it. And if I think about the 0.5%, 0.5% that I'm paying Wealthsimple, to me, I think that's because they put it all together. They're building my portfolio of balanced ETFs already. They're rebalancing. They're managing it all for me, and they have nice software that I can look at. Okay, that's fine. I don't have to think too much. 0.5% is okay with me.
I think that's pretty good value.
Then they're only using ETFs or investing in ETFs that have very low expenses as well, right? So it's like I'm going to be paying those no matter what, right? Whether I do it myself or not. So it's really hard for me to compare. But they seem to pick the ones that are like, in the 0.25 or the 0.1, even lower point. I think I've seen 0.05 or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, those are way, way better, and will build much bigger nest eggs, potentially for millions of Canadians. And I think robo-advisors will attract more and more and larger numbers of Canadian investors, and that's a very good thing.
But as you said, you could just do it yourself too, and only pay 0.1% like total, right?
Again, if you take a bit of time to learn the basics, learn a little bit about this stuff. And you'll be rewarded for decades to come, and it can
really
make an enormous difference. Okay, let's just think about it. Depending on how long you've got, if you're 30 or 40 years old,
sure,
investing smarter and lower cost, not taking more risk, but just lower cost, you can end up with double the investment income in
that
retirement.
Extra time at the end, right?
Who wouldn't want 100% raise?
Yeah, I know.
And it's not that hard.
We just have to have this outlook, and it is hard for younger people to see that far and to know that it's going to happen. But all you got to do is look at some examples of something's like 100,000, now it's 200, and in the last couple of years, like 300,000 or 400,000 turns into 7 somehow, and that's how it happens because compounding is really fascinating.
Yeah, so look, don't be intimidated.
Yeah.
Don't believe the industry portrayal of investing is too dangerous, too complicated. Don't even bother thinking about it. That's what they want. Take a bit of time to learn the basics. It's not that hard. Maybe it's not going to suit you, and that's fine. But you may well find that you can invest smarter, lower cost, and it can make a tremendous difference. And in terms of return on investment, spending a few hours up front and maybe a few hours a year can earn you thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Take a little time to learn the basics, and there's no downside.
We work so hard at our day jobs, right? Like you might put in an extra effort to get this project done, and maybe that'll give you a couple extra $1,000 in salary at some point. But we don't think about how just these little moves, this little bit of time that you spend in a whole year could get you like thousands and thousands of dollars in the future.
Yeah, I mean, the return on investment, and Warren Buffett said the best investment you can make is in yourself. So skip one of those Game of Thrones
that's right.
reruns or Grey's Anatomy, snuggle up and read my book or another book, or
that's it.
Or go online and take a bit of time to learn the basics, and you'll be rewarded forever.
So the book is Beat the Bank, and that's the thing. There are some great books out there. Not everyone's going to speak to you. So have a look at this. Have a look at Larry's book. This might be the one. Even if you tried other personal finance books, right? This might be the one that's like, yes, I get this.
Well, go on my website, larrybates.ca, and you'll see some of the endorsements I've received. Fantastic endorsements. Great reviews from Money Sense and
the trusted Canadian
and also
people.
Check out the comments, the reviews on Amazon.
Yeah,
a lot of people are finding this book is really helping them. A lot of people saying, "Oh, I wish I knew this 20 years ago." But also, just check out the first few chapters in the Look Inside.
Yeah, you have that up there on Amazon or on the website.
And, maybe it'll twig something or not. But whatever you do, find a way to learn a little bit about the basics of investing, and you'll be well served. So.
And the key is you're helping. You're not selling anything other than the book.
Yeah, I mean, it's $9.99 as the ebook, and actually, the way the book industry works is it doesn't pay to be an author.
You don't make a lot of money. Every author is told me that.
I clear about $3 if somebody buys the book.
Sure.
And all the time I spent, it's way less than minimum wage.
You just want to make sure that people who don't have a finance degree, right, and background such as yourself, can, and your sister, for example, like you said. There are people who are really smart at everything that they do, and finance is just one of those things that gets left out somehow of our brain,
That's right?
Because all of the brain power is being used up for that thing that you're really good at.
Well, when we're brainwashed into thinking it's too complicated or dangerous,
and that too,
and it doesn't have to be. I really enjoyed my career in the investment and banking business. I had a great time. I worked with great people. I learned an awful lot.
Yes.
And what I'm trying to do with the book is pass on some of the basics, not the sophisticated derivative stuff, and all that, but just the basic steps to help an individual understand the alternatives and make better decisions.
And that's what I'm trying to do with this podcast too. So thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be here,
coming to my studio.
Hey, I'll come out to Hamilton to talk to you anytime.
That sounds great. LarryBates.ca, Beat the Bank, Amazon, whatever. We don't have to tell people where to find books.
Yeah.
It's 2019 now, right? You should know where to find a book. Yeah, thanks so much.
It's been my pleasure.
If you like this episode, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or however you get your podcasts. While you're there, leave me a 5-star rating, a review, or both. And if you're already a subscriber, you're awesome. Please join my Facebook group so I can thank you. To find the group, go to Facebook and search for The Personal Finance Show. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Personal Finance Show. I'll be back next week with another great guest who will share their personal finance story.